Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are going way, way back in time to witness one of the biggest moments in the history of life on Earth, the day plants decided to leave the water and conquer the land. It was a green invasion that literally changed the face of our planet, and it all kicked off with two pioneering groups.
So, the big question is, how did they do it? I mean, going from floating in water to surviving on dry land is a huge challenge. Well, the answer lies with our two main characters for today, the Bryophytes and the Pteridophytes. These are the plants that wrote the original survival guide for life on land.
So let's meet our first green adventurers. For a long time they were all lumped together under the name cryptogams, which literally means hidden marriage. Sounds mysterious, right? Well, it's because they reproduce using spores, not big, obvious flowers. So for centuries, nobody could figure out how they did it. Now, the very first group to make that leap, the Bryophytes, had this one massive limitation. They were non-vascular. The slide calls it a lack of plumbing, and honestly, that's the absolute best way to think about it. Imagine trying to build a skyscraper with no pipes to get water to the top floors. That's the problem they faced, and it defined everything about how they lived.
Okay, so let's get to know these earliest pioneers a little better. We're talking about mosses and their relatives. And you're about to see why, even though they were technically living on land, they could never really say goodbye to the water.
So this is what life looks like when you don't have that internal plumbing. You have no choice but to stay small, right down on the ground, so you can soak up moisture like a sponge. They had to live in damp places, and here's the absolute deal breaker. They needed a thin layer of water for their sperm to literally swim to the egg. No water, no baby plants. Simple as that. And that's exactly why this nickname is so perfect. Just like a frog needs water to lay its eggs, bryophytes needed water for reproduction. They were living on land, yes, but they were still completely tied to the water. They were pioneers, for sure, but they were pioneers with an unbreakable tether. Okay, this part is super important for understanding what comes next. When you look at a nice green patch of moss, what you're seeing is the main plant, called the gametophyte. This is the dominant generation. Now, sometimes you'll see these little stalks growing out of the moss. That's the sporophyte. And here's the thing, it can't live by itself. It's totally dependent on the main gametophyte for all its food and water.
So, after millions of years of these mosses just kind of hugging the damp ground, evolution cooked up a truly revolutionary upgrade. The next group to arrive on the scene, the Pteridophytes, invented a piece of biological technology that was an absolute game changer. It would finally let plants stand tall and truly conquer the land.
And this was it. The big breakthrough was vascular tissue, an internal plumbing system. Pteridophytes, which includes all the ferns we know and love, were the first to figure this out. And this one single innovation changed all the rules for what it meant to be a plant.
I mean, look at this. This single invention solved every single problem that kept the bryophytes down. They got xylem, special tubes to suck water up from the soil, and phloem, another set of tubes to send food down from the leaves. All of a sudden, plants could grow tall. They could develop real roots to anchor themselves and spread out huge leaves to catch sunlight. This is when we get the first true land plants.
To really appreciate just how massive this leap forward was, we've got to compare their life cycles. Because this is where you see the fundamental strategy change. This is where you see who became the new star of the show. So, let's do a quick recap of the bryophyte story. The main character, the star, is that green, leafy gametophyte. The sporophyte is just a little sidekick, totally dependent, that shows up for a little while just to make some spores. But now check this out. With the pteridophytes, the roles have completely flipped. The big leafy fern plant that we all recognize, that is the sporophyte. It's now the dominant generation. And the gametophyte? It's been reduced to this tiny little independent structure, whose only job is to handle reproduction and then get out of the way. What a change. This chart just lays it all out perfectly. You can see the upgrades right down the list. No plumbing becomes a full vascular system. A simple little body becomes true roots, stems, and leaves. But look at that last one. The shift in dominance from the gametophyte to the sporophyte. That was the real secret sauce. That's what unlocked the potential for plants to get big and complex.
All this new complexity also meant ferns could develop some other cool new features. For instance, if you ever look really closely at a fern's stem, you might see these little brown, papery scales. They're called ramenta, and they're there for protection. It's one of those neat little details that sets them apart.
Oh, and this one. I bet you've seen this before. The way a brand new fern leaf uncurls.
It starts in this tight little coil, what we call a fiddlehead. Well, that elegant uncoiling has a fancy name, circinate fernation. It's a really smart way to protect the delicate tip of the leaf as it grows.
So how do these new dominant plants make their spores? Well, next time you see a fern, flip over one of the leaves. You'll probably see these little organized dots. Each one of those dots is called a sorus, and you can think of it as a tiny factory, just churning out thousands and thousands of spores ready to catch the wind.
Okay, so this is a really fascinating story about evolution, but you might be thinking, does it really matter today? The answer is absolutely. These ancient groups are so much more than just living fossils. They still play a huge role in our world. I mean, just look at how successful they still are. In a single country like Bangladesh, there are around 150 different native species of pteridophytes just thriving today. They are survivors.
And there's still work in forests. A little water fern called ozola is a powerhouse biofertilizer in rice paddies. Another fern relative, horsetail, is so full of silica that people used to use it to scrub their pots and pans. And the spores of some of these plants have been used in traditional medicine for centuries.
So, let's wrap this up. The bryophytes took the first incredibly brave step onto land. Then the pteridophytes came along and solved the plumbing problem, which allowed for the first forest to grow. But they still had that one Achilles heel. They still needed water for sex. The conquest of land wasn't quite complete. And that vulnerability set the stage for the next and maybe the greatest invention in the entire plant kingdom.